Nicholas let you right in with his house keys. As he swung the door open, he announced the group's arrival with a grand cheer. "We're back. Welcome home." His mother and father returned the call with a familiar greeting of their own. They'd been taking it easy on the couch with the TV, but it was promptly shut off with a click of the remote. Their children were entertainment enough. You, Derek, and George stood around in the front of the living room. Suarez child number 3 skipped ahead, going all the way around the back of the couch. Nicholas draped himself over his dad's shoulders and snuggled up to him from behind. "Happy Father's Day." Mr. Suarez reached up to clasp Nicho's arms warmly. "Thank
Wonderful.
you, my wonderful son." The well wishes were echoed by the older two brothers in unison. "Happy Father's Day, Dad." "Thank you as well." "Happy Father's Day, Mr. Suarez." It felt totally natural to join in on the memory making yourself. The content smile on Mr. Suarez's face confirmed that. "Thank you very much." The man of the hour struggled to get off the cushion with a heavy cape still hanging over him, but lifting Nicholas along with him, Mr. Suarez managed to get to his feet. In order to keep clinging to his parent, Nicholas had to stretch his chest over the seats of the couch and lean over on his tiptoes. That was as well and good with Mr. Suarez. He opened his arms wide to invite even more hangers to join in. The incredibly inconvenient positioning was no hold-up for his children. Derek and George shuffled in between the coffee table and their dad, carefully arranging themselves around each other and Nico. The group came together like pieces of a puzzle, only being able to attach in specific, perfectly aligned slots. You smiled at the sweet scene. Mr. Suarez relished being embraced from all sides. You could hear a muffled, rumbling laugh come from the midst of Suarez's men. Mrs. Suarez had a front row seat to the lovefest. She couldn't possibly move from her spot on the couch with her two largest sons blocking the way. Their mom sat tight and even managed to squeeze in one hand to rub her husband's lower back. All the love in the world being poured over Mr. Suarez had him flushed with pride. He spoke to his lovely family with as much affection for them as they had for him.
What a
"I'm so
day.
grateful to have you all here.
It's
Glad
no
to be here."
problem.
"Yeah, glad to be here." Nico chirped, a self-aware mimic of his big brother. "What day is it?" "Glad to be here." That comment was the cherry on the silly Sunday. The brothers snickered along with you. The bonding moment came to a sudden and abrupt end as Nicholas's grip finally slipped from his dad's neck. He collapsed like a broken bridge and swung face forward into the backrest of the couch with a puffing gasp. His long hair spilled over everywhere.
Oops.
"Are you fine, Nicholas?" Mr. Suarez craned his head over his shoulder to peer down at where his youngest child landed. Still flat against the pillow, Nicholas stuck a thumb into the air. That drew out snickers from the whole crowd, but it was mutually agreed that giving each other some space was for the best. The Suarez men shimmied One after another past the furniture and into the dining area. The last one in the pack was Nicholas, who finally pulled himself upright. The missus of the family left the couch behind as well. It was a full migration to the open area of the living room. The flow of conversation continued from there.
You doing
How's
okay?
your day been? Derek clapped a hand on his father's shoulder. What were you up to while we were out? With great excitement, Mr. Suarez answered the question. I took a nap. That's cool, Dad. It is. I hope the four of you had a pleasant afternoon as well. It was eventful. That's how you would describe it. You felt eyes on you. Nicholas had a conspirational glances set your way. He was what made it practically memorable, and he knew it. We had fun. It was a wonderful time of both old and new locals. George and Derek both nodded, not needing to add more than that.
That's
Good
what
to
I
hear
like
it.
to hear.
More current experiences were shared. Funny anecdotes were told. Stories seen lately were recounted. That was until a bold set of knocks startled everyone to attention. Shock rapidly sparked into joy. My friend is here. With that cheer, Mr. Suarez hot-footed into the door. He got dibs on first greetings, this arrival by default. It was his day after all. With that cheer, Mr. Suarez hot-footed into the door. He got his dibs on first greetings, this arrival by default. It was his day after all. And just as he thought, Mr. Holden had arrived. He stood in the doorway with a party-sized grocery store fruit platter in hand. If he had more time to arrange an order, you were certain it would have been a fruit bouquet instead.
Good
Welcome.
evening.
Please come in. Don't mind if I do. This is for you. Mr. Holden placed the plate of the delicately arranged fruit slices into his friend's hand as he passed through. And everyone else. I figured I should contribute something. How kind. The two strolled further into the space. Mr. Holden stopped in front of the group. Mr. Suarez continued on to the kitchen to set the food down in its proper place. Approaching Mr. Holden, you patted his arm. Separating from the rest of the group, you welcomed your former neighbor with a friendly pat. He turned to face you with a delighted grin. Happy Father's Day. Thanks.
Thank you.
Mr. Holden dropped an arm across your shoulder, keeping you close while still freeing himself up to greet the others. Then he cast his gaze over the Suarez family and addressed them good-naturedly. Hey everyone, we made it. Thanks again for the invite. Of course, it is good to see you, Cliff. Now it is a party. The two men shook hands firmly, a friendly greeting between the two longtime business partners. George raised an eyebrow in confusion.
Huh?
We? Me and phone. And by that I mean me and my son who's gonna call. It should be any minute now. Any minute. Cove would be calling in any minute. It had felt like an entire eternity since you'd last heard his voice. True, there were a few people you'd spent more time with in your life than Cole Holden, yet there could never be too much of that. The sooner that phone rang, the better.
Do you
Will you
mind?
mind if I put him on speaker? He can join the celebration. That would be wonderful. Fantastic. How have how have all you kids, or rather mature grown-ups, been? Arguably the most mature of the grown-ups referenced spoke up with his arms crossed up casually. It's been good. That's what I like to hear. Mr. Holden gave you one more affectionate squeeze before letting his hand drop back to his side. It was then that there was one final arrival of sorts. It came in the form of the gentle strumming of a guitar, a customized ringtone. Ah, that's Cove. The soothing music was contrasted greatly by the absolute panic it stirred up in Mr. Holden. He fished his phone out of his pocket, nearly dropping it in process, and hit the answer button. It was moments like that where you could see most clearly how the man in front of you had fathered his son. Hey,
Hey!
sport. Yeah, yup. I'm with the Suarez family. It's their place. Hold up. I'm gonna put you on speaker. Mr. Holden took the phone off his ear and tapped the screen once again. There was a moment of silence. Then a soft, tepid, disembodied voice came through the device from miles away. It was one you could recognize anywhere. Hi? Hi, we can hear you. Oh, Cove Holden. Hi, Cove. The entire Suarez family spoke up in good cheer to welcome their guest and their friend. Oh, great. Hey. A fuzzy breath came through on that reply. He was relieved at the warm reception. Cove couldn't help being a little awkward joining the party, even when he was not physically present in the room. Hey, Cove. All trace of nerves and hesitation in Cove fizzled into nothing under the powerful rays of his own self-created sunshine. Hey, Faye. Thanks for keeping my dad company. She's a great kid. Yeah, I think so too. His words were so soft and pure as afternoon clouds. So, happy Father's Day to you, to both of you. Thanks. It is a happy Father's Day. But Mr. Holden eventually remembered that you don't have to hold the phone when it's on speaker. He placed it down on the counter for safekeeping and to give others more room to gather around. With a clear clap of her hands, Mrs. Suarez called the groups to attention. Her eyes were squinted up from her smile-raised cheeks. Before it gets any later, how about we give Dad his gifts? Mr. Suarez had distracted himself with the fruit platter Mr. Holden provided. But the promise of new presents drew him back out into the main space of the room.
Yes.
Yes, I'd like my gifts now. Let's do it. I'll be right back. I hid my gift in Nicole's room. Oh,
yeah.
sure, we can wait. But not long. That was tacked onto Derek's statement good-humoredly, though not entirely as a joke.
Don't worry.
I got it. George flippantly gestured a hand over his shoulder, dismissing his dad's impatience, but the speed he walked at was brisker than a normal indoor pace. Derek's hand automatically came to rest over his pocket. He patted the box and card safely tucked inside. The sight spurred you into double-checking your own stuff. All was well and ready to go. Why George had to stick the gift inside someone else's bedroom became all too obvious when he re-entered the hall. Two free-form bouquets of beautiful flowers were spilling over the hands grasped around them. Oh, it was a fitting choice. As a thrilled smile bloomed on one of the receptionist's faces, the middle squire's son twisted his arms closer to himself. A few petals brushed against his cheeks. Sorry, I couldn't get this into a bag, so here it is. There's enough for Dad and Mr. Holden. Well,
Are you
me
sure?
too? Yeah, you too. Mr. Holden was truly flabbergasted. There was no deep personal connection between him and George. He was Mr. Suarez's best friend and merely an acquaintance of Junior's. Splitting the gift to share was far more consideration than Mr. Holden could have foreseen. He very obviously didn't know George. His problem-solving and thoughtfulness didn't surprise you at all. That is beautiful and very kind. Thank you, Junior.
Nice work.
Thinking. As Derek chuckled, George shook his head. I got lucky. You can go. Okay, first, Mr. Holden, this is for you. It was the card you've seen him get that morning. Derek passed it over to the man it was always meant for. Wow, another gift? Now that's a thoughtful family.
It's
You
nice.
guys are nice to think of my dad. Derek ran his freshly freed hand through his short hair. He had a lovely face on his face. It's no problem, bro. I also got lucky. And this is for you, Dad. Derek brought out the sleek package and held it out for the taking. Mr. Suarez plucked it up gladly. He tucked the bouquet under one elbow while pulling off the top of his new present. A tie. I will use this often. Thank you, Derek.
You're welcome.
Dad. Mrs. Suarez rubbed Derek's back, watching her husband admire the accessory. That will look great on the new shirt I got him. She winked knowingly and headed off the questions that statement might bring. I let him open that one earlier, so he didn't have to wait all day before presents happened. No wonder he'd been so well behaved. He'd been preemptively mollified. Mr. Suarez whistled innocently, shuffling around the tie in the bag. A box.
Thank you.
Thank you again, my loving wife. He was fully basking in revelry. Meanwhile, his supportive partner took the initiative to bring out a couple vases for George's flowers. They looked even better, fully spread out between the glasses. My turn. I've got something for you, Mr. Suarez, and you too, Mr. Holden. Hooray!
Aw.
Faye, you didn't have to do that. I wanted to. Exactly. Do not reject such generosity, Cliff. Right. You're right. I'm glad you did. Chuckling at the childlike joy of one father and the schoolboy shyness of the other, he lifted up the gift bags from earlier that day. The one for Mr. Suarez went over towards him, and the same for Mr. Holden. They both accepted the proper present from your hands. After sharing excited glances with each other, the dads of the day opened the gifts at the same time. Derek might have gotten the idea first, but that just meant it was a fitting choice for Mr. Suarez, right? It must have been so since held a smile on his face as he realized what it was. Another tie. Perfect. If Derek could get his dad a tie, you could pick out a tie too. Even if it was a repeat, Mr. Holden was so impressed. Classy. I can finally be a serious adult. Thanks very much. And there was one other person in the room who responded with encouragement. Derek snuck you two thumbs up when no one was looking at him, one for each of the gifts. You're very welcome. Glad you like it. As usual, the last person to take the stage was Nicholas, with a wide sweeping of his arms.
My gift is my wonderful presence.
Of
And
course.
it is wonderful indeed. It was no joke. Mr. Suarez looked upon Nico warmly. The temptation to baby the baby of the family was too strong. From the sidelines, the three other members of the family exchanged shrugs and wry smiles. Sorry that I couldn't even be there. Don't apologize. Being able to talk to you is more than enough, but his father's absolute assurance brought a tenderness to Cope's voice.
Thanks.
Thanks, Dad. The Suarez family did dote on Nicole, but all of them combined didn't beat the spoiling Cope Holden got as the delight of Mr. Holden's life. After the highest point of excitement with the gift giving, the casual get-together wound down even more. You and the trio of brothers were flanked around Mr. Holden's phone like a team huddle. Each person leaned against the counter, resting on their arms, but turns were taken on whose face was stretched out at the center of the circle and closest to the phone. The actual conversation mostly consisted of contributions from you, Derek, and Cole. The two younger brothers were focused on listening, trying to catch new bits and pieces about the person on the other end of the line. It was a friend of Derek's who they rarely had direct interaction with. In their minds, the green-haired man named Cove was an enigma. Reminiscing with your pals in front of an audience was an interesting experience, but that only counted for the children in the room. The parents were busy with their own activities. Mrs. Suarez had reclaimed her comfortable spot on the couch. There was a book in her hands. Her second gift of the day was not behaving like her kids and giving Mr. Suarez space to talk to his friend without scrutinization. The pair of fathers sat together at the dinner table. It was close enough to your group that occasionally a word or phrase cheerily bellowed in the background penetrated the line and pushed into your awareness. Mr. Suarez and Mr. Holden were shooting the breeze about life, love, and work, as far as you could tell from the vague, half-considered idea you had about it. But your ears perked when a name was clearly and intentionally called. Derek? Derek's head lifted over the crowd, pushing upwards with his hands against the tabletop. You made the same motion, finding the interruption as attention, getting as your own name would have been. A grinning Mr. Suarez was the sight that greeted you. He was scheming something, that much was obvious. Derek hummed. The gears were working in his head on why he was being summoned, and just him. No answer looked to come to his eyes. Realizing he was keeping his expectant father waiting, he dropped back down to be almost level with the phone. I've gotta go for a second, Cove. Talk to the bros. Tell them about Nevada. They've never been. Okay. Nevada? Derek slipped past his little siblings. The two waved him off without looking away from the screen. He took wide strides to answer their invitation. You remained slouched against the counter edge, your back turned to the table, but your focus on outside stimulation had flipped. It was the conversation happening at the table that you were conscious of. The words bubbling from the phone faded far into the window backdrop.
What's up?
What's up? We have a lunch event tomorrow. Right. I remember something like that was happening soon. It's not your party. You're invited to just show up. How good that you know so much already. You see, Mr. Holden does not prefer to attend such networking gatherings. It's true. Mr. Holden's voice rang out completely unapologetically. If you were watching, you'd bet he was shrugging his arms exaggeratedly. The only worse parties than those are funerals. This is why I need my very professional business partner, Gregory. Both of the Suarezes chuckled at Mr. Holden's frankness. Hearing just the sound of it made you realize how similar Derek's laugh was to his dad's. It was so much deeper than it used to be. Yes. Usually it is a given that I would be the one to attend, although there is now another option. I could have my responsible son attend as our representative. Huh? You didn't have to peek over your shoulder to see the amazed expression on Derek's face. You could picture it perfectly. That's an idea. I'm on board. It suddenly felt like it was Derek's birthday rather than Father's Day. You could still remember when Derek helping his dad with his business as an equal was just a far-off imagination, a fanciful thought for someday, and now you were present when it became a reality. It had sent Derek off into clouds temporarily, but it wasn't a dream or a joke. It was an actual situation he was present in. Derek gathered his thoughts and gave it a grounded response. Sorry, I can't. I've got plans tomorrow. That's understandable. Derek Suarez is in demand by all who know him. Not by everyone. Derek snickered slyly, and it seemed that the exchange was already reaching its conclusion. You knew what that supersending plan was of Derek's was going to the water park with you. You weren't sure what to think about the situation. You got Derek's attention to talk. The topic had come to involve you, even if it had been directed only at Derek. You turned towards the table directly. Psst, Derek, come here. While Derek's eyes went to you, Mr. Suarez's and Mr. Holden's gazes came right along with that. George and Nicholas were still entirely uninvested in the goings-on around them. They were highly engaged in prompting and prodding Cove while they could. That was one positive. You held Derek's stare for a moment, then stepped away from the entire crowd. 1 second, Dad. Take your time. The only free area in the living room was the opening to the side hall. You positioned yourself at the cups of the narrowed space. You could hear Derek's light jog coming from behind. He shifted himself in between you and the wall to face you. His voice was hushed, and his expression concerned.
What's up?
Is everything alright? Yes, but actually, I heard what you were talking about with your dad. The thing keeping you busy is going to the water park with me. The minor eavesdropping gave Derek no pause. He merely tilted his head with pure and honest confusion. Yeah, of course, it's gonna be awesome. And even if we didn't already have those plans, I'm not gonna waste the time we've got doing work. You're leaving so soon. Wouldn't be a waste if it's something you want to do. Maybe I could go with you.
Really?
Really? You mean that? Ever so slowly, Derek's eyebrows lifted on his forehead. His words were equally drawn out. We could, if you actually want to. He answered by default, but when it fully processed, Derek's relaxed demeanor returned and he could talk about it with his usual good humor. My dad wouldn't care, but are you sure a networking lunch is that high on your list of vacation activities? It wasn't before, but it is now. With a charming laugh and a grin, Derek embraced the new opportunity you'd presented to him. Alright, Faye, let's network. Together, you left the little hidden hole behind and rejoined the party. Derek went straight towards his father once more, and you went with him this time. With a stuffy, formal tone, Derek grandly gestured in your direction before addressing Mr. Suarez. Father, my own partner and I had a meeting and decided that we're willing to accept the offer and attend the luncheon as a team. Thank you for the consideration. Oh, wonderful. The funny effect Derek put on did not cause Mr. Suarez to treat him or you as a joke. He was earnest in his reply.
Thank you.
Thank you, Derek and Faye. It is kind of you to help. You've grown into such talented and successful people. I can't keep up at this point. After years of hard work, Derek had earned so much praise from his dad, yet he didn't accept it with beaming pride or even downplay it with light-hearted humbleness. He simply rejected it. Hardly. Something had changed. He wasn't a small teenager who could only guess what it meant to be an adult and believed what he was told. Derek had grown. He had lived experiences that words could be compared to. What he felt he done did not match with what his father was describing, but you had to wonder why. There wasn't anyone you thought was more deserving of the terms talented and successful. No good reason came to mind. Despite Derek never looking more mature, Mr. Suarez smiled comfortingly like he did when his son was still young. It wasn't a gesture lost on Derek. He once again showed that he was not a child. It was Father's Day, not the moment to worry his dad. He winked, smirked, and managed to smooth over the minor bump. "You're still way ahead of me." And that was the end of that. Later in the evening, a hearty homemade dinner was served as the final event of the occasion. The fruit platter had a place on the table as a side dish. It was thoroughly enjoyed, but eventually George stood up from his chair. He explained that he needed to start heading back to his dorm. Mr. Holden had to agree. He had an even longer trip home ahead of him. He collected his phone and patiently allowed Hove to give a long, drawn-out goodbye before the device was finally put away. "It only made sense for you and Derek to take your own leave too." The permanent occupants of the house, Nicholas, Mr. Suarez, and Mrs. Suarez, thanked everyone for coming. One last set of Father's Day well wishes were given, farewells were exchanged, and then it was time to go your separate ways. Derek pointedly pushed ahead and opened the door for George, Mr. Holden, and you. He didn't move a muscle until you all passed. He won that round. His parents and youngest brother stood by in the living room the entire time. Derek called out over his shoulders with the last note of the day's gathering.
Talk to you later.
"Have a hell of a day, everybody. Thanks for letting us be here." Then he followed you and shut the door behind him. As soon as you both climbed into the comfortable seats of Derek's car, he was ready for a new adventure. "What's the plan now? We've got what's left of the day to ourselves." "I'm not sure." You'd intended to really consider the question, but not a single thought had a chance to fully form before Derek sent disconnected mental threads flying with a shout. "Oh, shoot. What's wrong?" His head knocked against the back of the seat, and he slid lower in defeat.
This
"I
sucks.
didn't get the console from Nickel. That's what we could have done. Obviously, we'd already set everything up, almost everything." Derek offered an apologetic grin. "Hey, it's not as if I remembered." That does make it less embarrassing for me. Thanks, Faye." "You're welcome." He scrapped himself up and off the chair, choosing to lean over the steering wheel instead.
All right.
"Another day then. It'd be way too awkward to go back up there and beg Nicholas for his switch. That's something we've gotta play smooth." But without it, there's not much to do at the apartment. Words drifted off. His mind was working, and without another interruption, yours was as well. The loudest sound in the cabin of the still car was Derek drumming his fingers against the steering wheel. What did you want to do? That was the question. You had a starting point. It was worth considering not just what to do in general, but what you could do while you were there and that location. That location, of course, you couldn't be far from the big park. Your mom sometimes took you to the same place Derek frequented with his brothers. I got it. Let's go to the park.
Leave it to me.
Totally, that'd be perfect. And I know exactly how to get there. Buckle in. You didn't have to tell your He didn't have to tell you twice. You snapped the seatbelt into place for a ride. Anticipation stirred in the air, and the car swifted to life. Then Derek pulled out onto the street. The park was even closer than you'd guessed, because mere minutes after you'd come up with the plan, it had been executed. And luckily, there were a few free spots in the lot. Parking at the park was no trouble.